In this video, we're going to talk about whether we're going to have a bull cycle and when does it start, because the altcoins are still in a bear market and Bitcoin is just going sideways. Everything in this video on your journey, from my journey for you in this bull cycle. Let's get started. Before we're getting started, we're doing 2 videos a week. So this week we have done an altcoin strategy update where I've answered some of your questions. And now my question to you is, next week we're going to do an altcoin video. Which altcoin should we discuss? That's going to be, if you leave it in the comments beneath, then I'll be making a cool video about one of the comments that you have been providing. Now, the market sentiment is depending on which coin you're actually investing in. So if you're having a position into SUI, I think you're happy. If you're having a position into Bitcoin, then you're also happy. And I think that's what's shown with Bitcoin Amsterdam a week ago, where more people were there. The sentiment was great. The shittery on altcoins was also great. So, I mean, that is wonderful. But if you're into altcoins, I think you're still struggling at this point and waiting until the market starts to kick onto a bull market. And that's also shown in the fear and greed index, which I always use to just gather sentiment-based data. And if we look at the fear and greed index at this point, it turned to greed. And that is strange, because if you're into actual altcoins or projects or companies that are doing something like DeFi or DePIN or whatever, then I guess you're still into a negative sentiment at this point. But if you're into your favorite cat or dog or anything related to memes, then you might be into positive vibe at this stage. And if you're into Bitcoin, it's the same. So the fear and greed index in itself is probably not the best measurement of data at this point, but it shows that with Bitcoin approaching the all-time high and meme coins doing well, the sentiment can switch. And I think you need to have more data than just the fear and greed index, which is the fact that ETH against Bitcoin is still on a cycle low. And the question is, when is that going to turn around? And if it turns around, that's going to be the trigger where most of the altcoins are going to start doing well. And I was actually expecting ETH against Bitcoin to do better, especially since the rate cuts started to happen where the yields on government bonds were going down. And the yields within ETH, due to more demand, should be going up, which has been happening. But as a matter of fact, we have actually seen that ETH against Bitcoin continued to hit new lows. Now, that brings me to the next topic, which is the sentiment surrounding the Fed and the rate cuts, or which might or might not happen. And the sentiment is switching like day and night. So we had a rate cut in September, 50 bips, which was a pretty heavy one. ETH bounced upwards after that. But given the data that we've received on the economy and inflation, instead of ETH continuing to show upwards momentum, we've seen that the yields were going up and ETH went down. So you can see that there is a ping pong happening between the two. And this week, we've had an additional back-to-back rate cuts from the ECB, first time in 13 years, which shows that likely the Fed is going to do the exact same in November. But at this stage, we are likely waiting for the Fed to bring it out or to get weak economic data before we're going to have that reversal on ETH taking place. And that brings me to the key events that we're going to have in the upcoming months, which is the same as last week, unfortunately. We've got the elections. It's 2 weeks from now that we're going to be having the elections based on Polymarket, and it's depending on which website you're looking at, but Polymarkets, Trump is leading by 60%. And Trump is going to be very positive on the short term for the markets. I think in the long term, it doesn't matter who wins. But short term, Trump is going to be great for the crypto markets, as he has been announcing a lot of things at Bitcoin USA in 2024. So if he becomes it, probably markets are going to go up. Next, we've got the FTX repayments that is starting. Everybody has been milled. and the money is going to be sent out, which is likely a portion of that is going to be used in the markets to buy crypto again. And then, as I said, we've got the Fed meetings coming up. And in order to have another rate cut, or maybe even QE, which I think is going to happen next to each other, we need to have terrible economic data. And at this point, it's not happening yet, but I think we're on the crossroad of having it, especially since the labor markets are weakening. And you can see that by the next slide that I gave to you, which is the job cuts are worse than expected. So until this point in October, we already have 75,000 job cuts, and we are only close to halfway in, which means that if we double that, it's the worst month of this year, and likely unemployment claims, unemployment rate, ADP, and all those things are going to be worse, which is indicating that the yields are continuing to fall, and the likelihood of the Fed to do rate cuts will increase additionally with QE, and therefore more strength towards altcoins. So those are the key events. But now, what needs to happen in terms of price action to say that we are actually going to be into a bull market? The ultimate question is, when is the bull market going to happen? Or are we actually in it for Bitcoin already? And if you look at it from the price action perspective, we are just doing the exact same as we've seen in the previous cycles. Because Bitcoin is always going sideways during this period. And if we look at it, then we've had an actual peak in March of 2024 of $73,000, which in this cycle is different than the previous ones, as we had the ETF launch, indicating that we are having a higher price pre-halving. But as a reference, we are just doing the exact same as the previous cycles, because if we go back in time into 2016, for instance, then prior to the halving took place here. Prior to the halving, we had a period of November 2015 until May 2016, which is 7 months of sideways action. And then the halving took place, which during that period had a significant impact. But since June 2016 until December 2016, price was also going sideways before it started to break out and go into the banana zone time, I would say. Now, if we go back even further, then in 2012, we also see a period of sideways action before it started to go vertical. So every cycle at this stage, we have a sideways period of price action. And if we go back in time in 2020, then we see that we had a peak in June of 2019, which was during the period of Libra. And after that, price has been going sideways all the way towards September 2020, after which it started to break out. So it's just doing the exact same, but if we're looking on the lower time frames for Bitcoin, then it's actually showing a trend reversal, which is important to look at. I'm always posting this basically on a daily basis, in which I try to navigate everyone through the cycles, through what I see on TA perspective. But what you see on TA perspective is that since March, we are making lower highs, lower lows. And you can see that by the price action here, lower low at 56,000, 53,000, and then 49 was basically the capitulation wick during the Japanese yen carry trade, if you remember that. And we also see these lower highs here, which the last high was made in August 2024 at 64,000. And after that, price has been starting to make higher lows, higher highs. And it's still relatively boring, but we're slowly crawling upwards towards the all-time high. And I think that in the next correction, if we are going to have it, and Bitcoin sustains at $65,000, that's going to be the trigger where we continue to go towards the all-time high. And you need to understand, with all those highs being placed here, the amount of liquidity above those highs is substantial. I think it's even in the billions that those are going to be closed. They're going to be used to buy the markets or buy back into the markets. And then the more confirmation we get, the stronger the buying will be. As I think that most of the markets are currently waiting for the confirmation that we are breaking above the all-time high. But I think at this point, every dip you want to buy into Bitcoin, because we are already reversing the trend on the lower time frames. And it just simply takes time before the higher time frames are going to be switched. Now, the next question is, when altcoins, when alt season? It's the standard meme that we have, right? So when we're looking at Bitcoin dominance at this point, the end of the bear market is close. And I think the end of the bear market is going to be related to the elections and to the Fed meetings, where we are likely going to be having a reversal when rate cuts happen and ETH is going to be more attractive. I discussed this. Then we are approaching, based on the TA perspective, we are approaching a crucial resistance at 60% for the Bitcoin dominance. We ran all the way from 37 all the way towards 60, and we're technically in the longest bear market ever for altcoins, which is about to reverse, as in the next 2 to 3 weeks, we are likely going to have a bearish divergence on the Bitcoin dominance, and that indicates a reversal, just like we've seen a bullish divergence here in the Bitcoin dominance at the actual peak at the end of 2021. Now, that also shows a lot for ETH against Bitcoin. I mean, the chart for ETH against Bitcoin is absolutely super weak at this point, and you're technically waiting for clear confirmation of a trend reversal, which is breaking above 0.04. If it breaks above that level, that's the moment where you should be getting into your positions into ETH if you don't have anything ready at this point, and if you feel unsafe or you have some fear, which is completely understandable. But if it breaks and flips that level, that's the indication. And I think that in the coming months, that's where we're going to be landing, or that's what we'll be seeing. And that's also showing the exact same for most of the altcoins that we have at this point. For instance, with optimism, which I discussed in the previous video, crucial resistance zones are approaching for a potential breakout. So here we have a case that we are facing a resistance at $1.90 to $2, and we have been testing this level for multiple times already. The moment that we're going to be testing this resistance zone for the third time, the likelihood that we break back into this range is significant, through which you can expect altcoins to have a 50% breakout in like 2 or 3 days. And if you compare this price action with, for instance, TIA, then you can see that we have a rounded bottom. We technically break back into the range, we retest the previous support for support, and are attacking the resistance zone at this stage, that if we break through it, we get into the new range of March to June of this year, where we are all of a sudden breaking from $7 to $12 for TIA, and for the smaller market caps, probably double or triple the money during that period where we start to accelerate. So the question is, when is the bull market going to happen? I think we're already in it, but we need more and more confirmation, and that's going to take time. But you want to be ahead of the curve, which means that you want to be already positioned into most of the altcoins and also into Bitcoin, buying every dip, because the reversal has already started. What's happening in the markets is that we're just consolidating, and that altcoins are technically doing not much since August or since July. And the actual bottom was created during the period of the Japanese yen carry trade. Since then, some altcoins have been doing great and some are lagging behind. So I think that in terms of strategy, Bitcoin shows that we are already reversing the trend. And in this stage of the markets, what you'll be seeing on social media is conflicting. So I know that there are still people out there saying Bitcoin needs to go to 50K or 45K, which is technically impossible due to the average miner cost at this point, which is higher than the current price. And that is a very normal occurrence at this stage of the cycle, just before the actual banana zone is going to happen. So the perfect storm where all the ingredients are coming together, the elections, the Fed rate cuts, QE in China and the US, it's all getting there, which means that at this point, the best you could do is to remove your emotions, potentially delete Twitter as well, and just sit tight onto your positions before it's going to happen. And I think DeFi in itself is very attractive. I'm still happily positioned into all of those altcoins at this point. And I think that in the coming weeks, it can go quite fast. And I just said it before, Sui showed how fast it can be. It took it 4 to 5 weeks to go from 50 cents towards a new all-time high. And at this point, it's quite easy to get yourself positioned into the markets. But once it starts to run, the risk is going to be higher and it's more tricky to get into your position. So my strategy is just staying into my positions. I'm entirely into altcoins. I'm staying there, and I'll be happy to start selling at a later point in this cycle. Thanks for watching this update. In the upcoming week, we're going to do 2 videos, an altcoin video and of course the weekly video on Sunday. If you have any feedback, make sure to leave it behind in the comments beneath, and I'll see you again on Thursday's video on an altcoin. Ciao.